Hi, so this is September 26, 2023, and I have a journal entry of just some things that I've been thinking about. Rather than worry about having a more polished, high production value video with lots and lots of editing and graphics, I decided to just start doing videos because it's probably better to just do them than to not do them at all. But I wanted to go through some of what my thinking has been lately, especially about my process and what I'm painting. So I recently started painting again and even stripping some old paintings that I had, which I've never done before, just stripping them off with chemicals and starting over again. Just essentially erasing everything that I've done in the recent past that I don't feel good about and that I don't like, and starting over again. And I started out by just painting pictures of my pets and then some of my friends' pets. And I really loved painting. It just felt really good. And a lot of the old cathartic things that I really loved about it started coming back. And it just feels really good. And I can't believe I ever decided to stop painting in favor of something else, collaging mainly, a long time ago because I really liked painting and I found ways to get around some of the annoyance that I've had with it. So I've been having a really good time with that. But I've also started to do what I've kind of always wanted to do and start painting close to, but still in my own style, photorealism, but then also using an underpainting, a true underpainting, black and white in my case, and then glazing over it. I've never really fully committed to that. I've done sort of like a hybrid of that, mostly just like a sort of direct and glazing method with no true underpainting. Frankly, I just never had the patience to just paint everything in black and white. But now that I'm older, I kind of find myself going back to trying to do a real underpainting. And that's been all right so far. I'm definitely learning something new with that. But then I decided just out of the blue, which ideas usually come to me just completely out of the blue. I was looking through some of my old photographs and I found not this picture of Condoleezza Rice, but this picture. And this is a cleaned up version of it. It's edited and stuff because this is actually taken sort of at dusk. And it even has like a flash on it too. Anyways, so this picture was taken around 2012 that I want to say. It's either 2011 or 2012. Three of my friends and I went to Lacroix, Wisconsin because we heard that it was a huge party town, which I can attest to. It really is. It's a college town. And we went there during Oktoberfest because we heard that it gets crazy there and there's just random house parties that you can go to all the time. I brought my camera with as I was in the fashion of doing. I just took pictures of people being crazy in drinking scenarios. Usually in Madison, Wisconsin, sometimes in Milwaukee. Um, I just took pictures of just weird shit because weird stuff always would happen around me, and it's just like I have to document this for something. In the past, I used to make digital collages where I would cut some of this stuff out, but I don't think that it ever really had the type of meaning that I was looking for. And this picture was used in a collage in the past, a digital collage, which I'm not super happy with. I won't even show it to you if I could even find it. But this to me looked more like a painting, a giant painting. And the reason why I thought of that too is because I have been looking at a lot of Renaissance art and just old masters paintings in general. And a lot of them used to be a proto form of cinema, if I could make that leap for you. people used to view paintings as a form of entertainment at some point. Yeah, it used to be in service to religion, but later on, when paintings became more of a luxury item, rich people used to buy them and spend a long time viewing them. And the paintings that are the most famous, mainly from the 1700s and the 1800s, for storytelling, had a lot of stories going on in it. But sometimes the paintings also, too, could be emblematic of their time. Like basically a time capsule. Like they're trying to show everything that's happening during their time period. And I think that this painting or this picture is sort of that too. I think it has a lot of questions that need to be answered just by the content of the image, what exactly is going on, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of stories that could be delved from it. There's also allegory that I feel like can be taken from it too. I'm suddenly reminded of a painting, and I want to see if I can find it real quick. This one up. The reason why I bring this one up is because there are so many different metaphors, allegories, stories, whatever you want. There's a lot of interest in this. You can see here they have a bird inside of a glass globe, we'll call it. And there's a scientist that has put the bird inside of the vacuum and he's pumping the air out to demonstrate what happens when you take away oxygen from an environment. And that obviously may be super obvious to us, but back then they were kind of just coming to terms with there's air, there's molecules, there's elements. I don't know exactly where we were in science, but people were doing things like this. So this is a painting by Joseph Wright of Derby in 1768. So that kind of gives you a time frame of when this is and the state of mind, at least people in Europe had about science. There's many different people in it. This is obviously very cruel, especially to our eyes now. You can see these two girls looking away in horror, as you naturally would. But then also, too, this man, presumably their father, is like, no, look at what's happening, though. Like, yeah, this is a cruel experiment, but do you see? You need oxygen to breathe. There's a young man here who looks like he wants to be a scientist, so he's looking with great intent. There's two lovers over here, or they're presumed to be. They're ignoring all of this because they're in love. And then you even have here the old man who, I don't know, he might represent knowledge or something. This is just a just off the cuff reading of this, and that's kind of what paintings were like at this time. And I kind of see that in this wrestling image. There is a reason why I do have this Condoleezza Rice picture up as well, and I can explain that. So this picture, I did see it quite a long time ago, probably actually a little bit after I took that picture in 20. No, it was before I took that picture. So this was probably, doesn't matter, 2010, probably around there. And I saw this in Chicago. But it's by an artist named Luc Tuymans, and he does paintings in one day. I assume he uses a projector to do this, and he has this weird softening effect by the brush strokes that he uses. I believe he only uses up and down strokes and then side to side strokes, and that's intentional to give this kind of um, faint effect. But something that he does, and the reason I bring him up too, is because I'm trying to combine two things. I think that if I combine pictures that I've taken, which he'll paint pictures that he's taken, personal pictures from his family, pictures from popular media, and he'll paint them. And in that context, he kind of gives them a new context or a new meaning. They can start to have different meanings. One thing that is common about all three of these is his idea of a mask, a faceless, emotionless mask that can be seen in some photographs. Um, it often has a indifferent kind of feeling. He says that his work is all about violence and the violence of the past and nothing more. He often brings up World War II as he is both Dutch and German, and people in his family on one side were Nazi sympathizers, and then on the other side, they were resistance fighters. And that was something that came up in his family with his mother and his father in his upbringing. And the point of the subject was always one that brought him a lot of fear, and a lot of his images bring that up. And I'm wondering, maybe I don't have as much to talk about, but I do have a lot of personal experience that I think can be talked about through the photographs that I've taken and the paintings that I could make from that. I feel like if you make a painting of a photograph, you're like sort of underlining it, or you're taking what would normally be just text on a page and you're creating like a graphic out of it or something like that, and it gives it a different viewpoint. So with this photograph, and I'll explain some of the things that I'm seeing here in a second. I have to let my cat out. So I can explain some of the things that are going on in here. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think this is actually two of my friends' pairs of legs. This friend is unfortunately dead. She died maybe around 10 years ago. So not much longer after this photograph was taken, which this is one of the last times that I ever really hung out with her. But basically, the story behind this image, and maybe I can illustrate that with the title of the painting, which I will say a lot of my collages that I've done in the past, the title is just as important as the collage. It really gives the viewer some insight about it. Luc Tuymans does this. I remember there was a painting where it was like called, it just looked like a view from a window, but in the end it was like the view from Ed Gein's cabin or something like that, or Ted Bundy's cabin. I can't remember who, but that reveal in the title was so important. It just looks like such a mundane view, and you're like, what the fuck is this a painting of? And you look at the title and it just like mind blown. Okay. You've given this a different context. He has another one that's quite famous. It's called like The Gas Chamber. It just looks like an interior, an empty interior. But the room has such terrible history and bad energy, but he gave it a different context. It just does something different. Anyways, we were exploring for quite a number of days in Lacroix and seeing a number of drunken atrocities. And one of them, we came up to this house where this father, who's the one on top, and a son were hanging out with people in front of this house, and the lawn just looks absolutely trampled, which you can kind of see here. There had been some sort of party or something the night before. Honestly, the whole town looks like that during Oktoberfest. This being the third day, I believe, of Oktoberfest. And the son said something like, "Oh man, I could totally take my dad in a wrestling match." And he was very confident about this. And the dad, who kind of is like a half foot shorter than him too, I do remember him being a lot less bigger than the son. The son was a big dude, and they just started wrestling on the ground, and the dad just really pinned him good, like kind of easily. It was really funny, but it was also like a really intense struggle that kind of seemed almost too serious. Like the dad really wanted to show him that he was still young, even though he was probably 50, and he wanted to show him where the bear shits in the woods. And a crowd all gathered around, which you can see. No one tried to break this up. We were all there to watch it. I took several pictures of it, this being the best one, and thus the best picture for this painting. The other thing that is of note is they have writing all over them. You can see on their legs and on their arms, they have Sharpie writing. And at first, it probably looks like tattoos, but at closer glance, you can see that they got really fucked up the night before. They got so drunk that they passed out. And as tradition in America, at least in American college, or at least back in the day, I'm sure things have changed, but if you get passed out drunk, people used to write dicks on you with Sharpie and probably all kinds of other things if you don't wake up. And you can see dicks and butts and all kinds of writing. On the man, you can even see Go Seahawks. Somebody crossed out Seahawks and wrote Vikings. Um, I like a big booty bitch. Penis. There's a dick there. There's a dick there. There's a dick here. Somebody actually even wrote, which presumably was a woman, I think you drank too much. Hope you had fun, smiley face. And then the next day they woke up to start drinking again, and this is what transpired near the end of the day. You can even see, too, in the grass, there's sunglasses that fell off. I don't remember if it was the dad or not, but it probably was given his attire. He has an Affliction t shirt on, he has khaki cargo shorts on from, it looks like, and I'm just noticing this now, Aeropostale. It says A87, so it's definitely an Aeropostale shorts. And then he's got the big clunky white dad shoes, Nikes, of course, which raises a lot of questions. Obviously, this dad is here to hang out with his son, but one question that I've always had is he divorced? Does he now live with his son at his college hangout house? Is he that disgraced of a divorce that now he's going through some sort of weird midlife crisis that he's forced to hang out with college kids and prove that he's still young and spry because he's having some sort of identity crisis? It's either a midlife crisis or an identity crisis. I don't know. But he's really bent on showing his strength when a lot of other people his age maybe wouldn't do that. But given the events of the past few years, I almost feel like this image is a prophecy. At the same time, there's protests going on in Madison, Wisconsin, looking to recall Scott Walker because of his union busting legislation. So there's a lot of political strife there too. But then there's also a lot of anger from conservatives about Barack Obama being the president and some of the socialist things that he was enacting as well. And so at the same time, you had the Tea Party movement, if you can remember what that was all about. There's also the Occupy Wall Street movement going on, and that happened in many different cities. It wasn't just on Wall Street where this occurred. In the end, there is kind of a common denominator, though. It's wealth inequality. This older generation had privilege, or at least they perceived that they were entitled to something. But that all started kind of going away. For good or for ill, they blamed certain groups. But the reality is it's wealth inequality, or at least in my opinion. And there is this younger generation that was kind of cast, and I was a part of that, was cast into the world after school, into an environment that was financially inhospitable to them. And there really, frankly, was no room for them in the workplace or buying a home or the typical things that you would uh, consider to be the American dream. And so there's two people now, at least in our time, that I perceive. There's this Gen X, and then there's this millennial or Gen Z, two groups or two factions that hate each other. And that struggle is still going on today. Um, both groups still have this animosity towards each other, and it's getting, in my opinion, worse. That's all fine and good. I just wanted to document that through making this picture of painting, because isn't this really just an allegory or a metaphor for this? The other thing that I really think could come through as like a B plot or a subtext is both of these generations aren't taking very good care of themselves, particularly the older one, who would get in a scrap like this, who would drink too much or do drugs like pain killers and things like that. And it's just an unfortunate fucking thing about our time. It's terrible. And I think that this could be a metaphor for that too, just with his attire and who he is, the older man. There is a storytelling quality to it though. Why is there a crowd gathering around? Why are these two people wrestling? That might not really matter as much, but it it will leave the viewer, I think, asking more questions and leading to kind of the introspective talking that I was just doing. Maybe it wouldn't be as on the head as what I was talking about. I have asked several people what meaning they get from this, and they've just, people have had some really great insights. Other people just haven't, and it might just speak to the level of what they think of when they see different images in different contexts. So, enough of that. So I did buy a big canvas for this. It's huge. Honestly, haven't worked on something this big since I was in college, mostly because I don't have the space. Well, now I do. I think it's 60 by 36. It's a 2 by 3 aspect ratio. Basically, it's the size of a 60-inch television. And I did start working on it already. Quite easy to get going. I mean, the other thing that I guess I should say too is I've been looking at Holbein paintings and others too, where they have like this crazy textiles, or Kehinde Wiley paintings for that matter. Just love how he's able to have all of these unique patterns, textile patterns. And I've always wanted to be able to do that. This was a perfect opportunity too. I mean, we can also talk about composition too. I really think that this is a good composition. Although I will say, I think that this corner is rather lacking, and I don't know how to deal with that. I think it might just be fine, and I'm overthinking it. But this is a really good composition. This also kind of reminds me of like Delacroix. Um, the Lion Hunt is an example, although he does this quite a bit. It's just like these straining figures and just rough tension. Now, could I ever replicate this? Probably not right now. I'm not so sure there's an appetite for this sort of thing right now either, but just the struggling and the wrestling of the two figures kind of reminds me of this. Um, just figures in motion. And I really love that quality about his work. Don't think I've ever seen one of his in real life, but then again, up until this point, I thought I'd never seen a Caravaggio, but then I started going through some of my images and I was like, that looks like a Caravaggio, and I have actually seen one. So, what is it? Boy with a Lute. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is that I still have a lot of canvases or boards that I want to do stuff on, very similar to this. And I was going through some old images, and I might use images from elsewhere. I've already been looking at screenshots that I took 1 million years ago, too, on a Chromebook, which was like my first computer that I could actually afford. And I started to pull photographs. So now the photographs that I'm bringing up, I am not too sure about as far as being used as paintings. I'm really unsure about them, but being safe isn't really what art's about. I know that this picture was so obvious and I committed to it very quickly. And that's why I painted on a really big thing. But there's some paintings that need to go with this thing. This is probably a one liner, maybe not, but I need a bunch of one liners to go with it. It needs a series. So I found some images that I've saved from my past, and I'm wondering if they can be used as paintings, and I'm going to just talk about them. So in my head, this image is a smaller painting, but it's an interesting one because well, first of all, this was a piece that a really good friend of mine did for an art show that I helped organize. And this art show got kind of like taken over by like hipsters. I don't know what else to say about that. It might not matter as much, but it just looks like, we go back to Delacroix again, but this looks like Napoleon on a horse on the top of a mountain. But it's something different. It's skeletal. It's a shell. It's a fossil of that. It's miniature, almost like the book Indian in the Cupboard. And it probably has more personal meaning than a regular viewer might appreciate. It might be too dull of an image. But basically, this is a photograph that I was taking and then I took maybe like 100 times throughout the gallery. It's just pictures of everybody's work so I could document it. But now in this context, it could take on a completely different meaning. I'm not sure what it would be. Without revealing too much about my friend either, it's about personal struggles with their own creativity as well. And that's something I can really relate to. And for me, this has a lot of emotional power to it. Now, again, I've never been a huge fan of people that make artwork, and when you try and hear the explanation of it, they use a cop out and say it's personal. Um, I don't really like that. That's really boring, and it is a cop out. But I might be able to do that a little bit more. I feel like I've been given a lot more permission to do that based off of that first wrestling picture. So this next picture is a screenshot from the movie Red. I don't think it was Red 2. It was John Malkovich. There's this big scene, which I've taken screenshots and made artwork with before, in these shipping containers where the characters are all shooting at each other. And it is just kind of like a corny action movie. But in recent years, I've gotten really fascinated with corny action movies. And I saved another screenshot, which is farther up in the order. Don't look. Of Bruce Willis looking quite pathetic, scared. He's got a bloody eyebrow. And then, of course, I'm going to forget her name because I always do. She was in Weeds. She's in this movie. She's kind of a weird lineup with him, which is interesting. It makes you ask questions. And then in the background, you also have like a Pamela Anderson kind of pinup with an American flag and she's saluting, but she's also like wearing like leather cop uniform. I was thinking that these two images might be good together as a diptych, where it's just the two of them. Maybe the two panels fold, and John Malkovich is pointing the gun at Bruce Willis's face, and he looks scared. What does that mean? For me, I'm not so sure I'm cool with the directness of John Malkovich pointing the gun at Bruce Willis's face. I think that might give off the wrong vibe. But if anything, though, it's a comment on how much these type of movies have formed people's a certain people in our society's identity. It's just like they have a lack of real education other than these type of movies. Many people that I've met in my life that I'd rather them not really be that much of a part of my life, coworkers or whatever, they talk like and they fancy themselves like a Liam Neeson. They always have these scenarios that they talk about, like, well, if somebody did this or that, I would shoot them. And they really don't understand the reality of violence, of guns, of gore. And I'm not saying that I have a better understanding, but in some ways, their ideation of what that sort of stuff actually looks like is childish and naive. And it's really based off of Hollywood. And the fact of the matter is, John Malkovich or Bruce Willis or Harrison Ford or like Liam Neeson, they're old. They can't really do these things. They can't do their own stunts. That's why probably Tom Cruise brags about doing his own stunts because there ain't nobody in that age bracket that's even able to do what they do because they're going to get fucking hurt. And then that's the end of their, career potentially. Maybe not. But if anything, it's just a comment on how those movies have like informed our public, I guess. I would have to think about it more before committing to this, I think. So another thing that I noticed was I had a lot of pictures that other people had taken of me. And I've been looking at pictures by old masters, and there's this tradition, and then as well as Luc Tuymans too, but making self-portraits. And I thought about this idea because so many of these old pictures of when I looked young, and so much younger than I do now. I mean, I look like a different person, realistically. But this idea of a portrait of the artist as a young man, except it really would be this was what I looked like when I was a young man. Um, I really like this picture. I really like this Vermeer sunlight coming through the window. But then it has these signifiers of youth and rebellion, or at least my ideas of it from that time. I wanted to be like a punk. I was always trying to imitate like late 1970s punk. I used to have this Harley leather jacket, and I would cut my own hair and it'd be all fucked up, and I would dye my own hair, and I'd smoke cigarettes all the fucking time, even though it was gross. And I was just really concerned with being a badass, and I think that you get that view from this. But it also can be like an old master's painting, and I see this being like maybe not a 24 by 36, but the next size down wood panel, and just really try and make it look like a Vermeer. There's not much meaning to this picture. A friend of mine when I was in school, we used to smoke in this cafe, even though you weren't allowed to. But there was this room where you could smoke cigarettes, and they didn't say anything. And there was no ashtrays in there for some reason, so we used a bottle cap. And she took a picture of me like this, and I guess I never thought it could be a painting. I saved the picture because it was a nice picture, but with the eyes that I'm looking at it with now, it's just like this is just like a Vermeer, except a modern one. I really like the expression on my face too. I mean, it reminds you of like the lips of like Da Vinci, or the eyes of like a Caravaggio boy, but then to the fingertips are something like Michelangelo or a John Singer Sargent. Again, all modern though. Um, I think that the leather would be really nice to paint. There's a lot of depth to this image too. I'm thinking of all of this when I think of the images that I'm going to do to determine whether I'm going to put any effort, any investment to do it. So that's all part of it. Okay, so this was an image taken in Milwaukee the weekend before St. Patty's Day. And so this is the weekend before St. Patrick's Day, which is apparently some huge drinking holiday too. I don't know why. I've never known why, but I definitely got drunk on those days too. But this was on Water Street at a bar. I actually think it was Brady Street. Does not matter. It's just a crazy picture. Again, though, I get some vibes from composition in the olden days, but then it's got a modern twist to it too. I don't really think this has much meaning to it, so I'm not as keen to actually paint this or not. Um, it's just kind of a sort of interesting photograph. It would be fun to paint like these bottles. I do like that two of the people are breaking the fourth wall, so to speak, and looking at the viewer. That's kind of a nice quality. If anything, it's probably just more documentary than anything else. I do like these two dudes that are ignoring what's going on over here, which is kind of like, when you get older, you just don't give a fuck about crazy stuff like this anymore. I mean, even when I took this photograph, I thought it was ridiculous. Yeah, there's not much else to say. He's a good looking dude. How about that? This is another picture that I was thinking might be an interesting self portrait. So I used to have a girlfriend that would take pictures of me looking at artwork all the time. And I'm not sure if it was because she got bored with how I look at every single thing and read every single placard in museums, but I have quite a few photographs of me in a museum that might be kind of interesting too. This one has a lot of depth, and it also has some of my favorite art from this time all in sort of the same gallery. This is the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. I don't think I need to say much more than this, but I do love the depth of it. I do like the geometry of it, and just this lone figure walking. I think is great. It's nice, but maybe I won't paint it. I don't know. This is a very interesting photograph to me, and I think it might translate to a painting very well. I do wish it was a little bit sharper than this, but it might be fun to paint it just as fuzzy as it is. One thing that I have noticed from the photographs from back then, though, is they are not great quality. They're not very clean or crisp, very low megapixels. I almost feel like film cameras were better than digital cameras were in the early 2000s. But this is a picture of my dad, who's a very like rough man. He's very serious and he needs to be a macho man all the time, which kind of reminds me of me at that time too. I was doing much the same thing, very much putting up a wall. But I think at his core, he's a very sweet man and he loves animals. Even though we did hunt animals and eat them, he actually does really love animals, including deer that we shot. Like, he just loves nature and being out in it, and he loves dogs. And this dog, Shaggy, he lived to be like 20. He very very shy, very afraid to be held by people other than his mom. And I found this photograph. I don't know who took this. I don't know if it's my aunt or what. It's my aunt's dog. But he's seated and just looks very nice. You know, if you try and get him to smile in photographs, he like frowns. And this is an actual natural smile. He is actually enjoying petting Shaggy. And I think that this is really what he looks like when he's happy, actually. It would be an interesting photograph to paint, though, because you have this warm light in the corner, but then you also have this weird blue ghostscape outside. And that almost kind of reminds me of Hopper, the Nighthawks in particular. It's like you're sealed in this room, and the outside is so cold and caustic. So it's an interesting photograph that might work, might not. I don't know. I don't see this being a very big photograph or a very big painting. So this one might be worth it. My parents might like this painting. I'm not sure, but there's a lot to it, I guess. Maybe more for me personally. So this one I'm really not so sure that I'm gonna do, but I did like some of the things going on in it, some of the elements and just the geometry and the composition of it. And this would be another portrait as a young man. I was probably 21 when this picture was taken, and I look a hell of a lot younger. But you can also see like the poverty and the alcoholism seeping through. Um, this is my parents' house. You can see in the background there's a dog looking at the viewer. That was one of my dogs. And I really like the different kind of like Renaissance quality items around, like an old chest, a vase, flowers on a lattice. But it's also very artificial. It's very much of our time. It's trying to pretend to be something from 300 years ago, cottage garden esque. I don't know. It might not be that good of. I'm probably not gonna paint this, but I would enjoy actually making it, I guess. But I don't think it has like that powerful meaning. This is an interesting photograph, mainly because it's something that I've seen many times where people like to take a photograph close up to a television screen. So I was actually in New York City when this guy, I believe the party that he belonged to was the Rent is Too Damn High party, and he wore these black gloves and he had this ridiculous beard and haircut. And he was as crazy as everybody made him seem in the memes much later. I don't know why it took so long for it to take off, but I remember turning on the TV in New York City and seeing this, and then taking a photograph of it because it was so unbelievable. But I've seen this kind of thing where they're it's usually from a photographer's documentary standpoint where they're like, oh, I'm stuck in the Congo and like um, there was a coup and like the dictator now installed is talking on TV, and then they'll like take a picture of like the TV, and it like adds all this seriousness to the subject matter that they're trying to capture. Well, this is quite the opposite. I don't know if I could replicate this in paint, to be frank, truthful. It could be something. I don't know what it's a comment on. It might just be art about art. I don't know. Somebody might just want this because they love that meme, but that is so dated and antiquated at this point. I'm not so sure. This is also New York City. I don't recall what artist this was that did this, but you like look through the thing and then you look and see some other shit through the thing. I think it lined up with the architecture. I don't really remember. I think just this would be a fun painting to paint, although I think there's a lot of baggage wrapped up in this. One thing that I do really like is just the colors. None of the viewers are looking at each other. Even this person is like going that way. That's reminiscent of a couple different artists, but I think we can just move on. Again, this is something that maybe more be a technical thing, but I really love how the lighting is in this, even though it's dark. You have just like these masks of the people that might be taking more of Luc Tuymans than I'm probably allowed to do. Again, none of the people are looking at each other, just sort of like a Hopper-esque thing to do. Probably not going to paint this. This would be another portrait of the artist as a young man. This is at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And again, it's just one of those pictures where it's my ex-girlfriend just taking pictures of me looking too long at something. But it is kind of a nice photograph. It is kind of confusing and jarring. It is blurry, which I don't think I would. Maybe I would recreate. I don't know. Not sure if I would do this or not. But I'm underneath like this sculpture that kind of takes up this whole central meeting area. I have seen people run into it multiple times over the years that I've been there, which is quite funny. um, but yeah, just a really introspective feeling, which is something I always have. And then just like the composition is very beautiful. I don't really know what to say about this one. So this is definitely a New Year's picture. I was very wasted when I took this picture. This was well past midnight, at a bar that, if you got drinks, it was a tiki bar. If you got drinks of a certain kind, you get the container. And my girlfriend at the time got the whale one, and I got the cat one. And she thought it'd be funny to make the whale talk to the cat like a drunky fish. I don't know what this would be commenting on. It's a nice composition. I like the warm colors, but it is definitely reminiscent of just the drunk culture that I used to be a part of in Milwaukee. And this would just kind of be a personal image that would illustrate that, I suppose. It would be an unusual painting. It might be okay to do. Not sure. This is another picture from Milwaukee of my friend, and this is definitely her personality. She's giving the viewer the middle finger in a haze of cigarette smoke while holding a crushed up beer and looking quite evil. I think this would be a really challenging painting to do, and that is something that I like about it. I love all the grid work of it. I like that you capture kind of the rain that happened in the background and it's moist, and then there's this weird light that's sort of like a lens flare. I really like this picture, photograph. I don't think it has much more meaning other than just again that drunk culture that I was a part of, and we were just all taking pictures of it. Apparently, it might just be a little too on the nose, but some things I just want to paint, and I think that's something that I need to realize, and I've probably known it all along. But it's just like just paint the things you want to paint, make the art that you want to see. Stop caring so much about what other people think of it or what kind of meaning they get from it. But that about wraps it up, though. I don't have any more images, I don't think. No, that's it. So that's kind of where my head's at. I'll leave you with Condoleezza, who, by the way, Luc Tuymans used to think was really sexy. Quite the realization, or quite the admission for the public to know. But I'll see you guys on the flip side. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching.